Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to this bonus edition of Locked On Texans, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Cody Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody, COTYDAVIS_24. And ladies and gentlemen, as you guys can see, I have two very important guests with me in the studio today, Soloman Wilcots and Pete O'Haron. And guys, I don't want to mess up the name of your company, so I'm going to let you guys introduce that to the listeners and viewers.
Well, yeah, I'm here with Pete O'Haron, and he has a wonderful company, FibroBiologics. And, I was diagnosed recently, Cody, with a degenerative disc, L5-S1 disc in my back. So I went looking for one of the best stem cell-based company that uses stem cell technology, but to a whole nother degree, because there's so many innovative technologies that are coming out in medicine to help us old broken down football players to get us back out there doing the things that we love. And there is a Houston-based company, FibroBiologics, that Pete O'Haron and his partners are doing some great work there. And Pete, help tell the people what you're going to do to help me get back on my feet, and many people like me who are dealing with disc degeneration in their back.
So we use Fibroblast. There's two cells in the human body you can use to regenerate tissue. There's a stem cell, which everybody's heard about, and there's a fibroblast, which almost nobody's heard about. But it actually is the most populated cell in the human body. It outnumbers stem cells 15,000 to 1. So we inject that into the disc. And when we inject those fibroblasts, the pressure that your vertebrae put on the disc forces those cells to turn into a cell called a chondrocyte and regrows the disc for you.
See, Cody, see, I hang out with smart people, right? And if you do that, that solves a lot of problems. It really does. And so I think the work that Pete and Fibroblast are doing, and Pete, you can tell us a little bit more of how the technology is developing and where you're at within that phase right now.
Sure. We just finished a human trial for degenerative disc disease. We're also using Fibroblast. We have a program starting for general orthopedics. So, Solomon, your damage you did to your cartilage, you did in your high school and the college days, and that damage stays there, and it gets worse and worse over your life. So we envision a day when we'll be able to inject these fibroblasts into your knees and into your hips and into your shoulders and prevent that long-term damage for that. So we're working on the disc space. We're pretty far along on that. The next one up is general orthopedics. So I think you'll see a lot of our athletes being able to take these injections early on.
And speaking of these injections that they can actually take early on, Pete, can you just talk about how important it is for young athletes to start, taking a little bit more care of their bodies? Because it's interesting that I have you here on the show, especially a couple of days before the NFL draft, because all of these prospects, of course, they will want to have all these long careers, but sometimes injuries can kind of derail that. And here in the city of Houston, we are very familiar with how injuries can rob players from a promising career, i.e. Arian Foster, who used to be the running back for the Houston Texans. I mean, if we could switch over to the NBA, I mean, there was a whole decade that was robbed from the Houston Rockets when you look at Tracy McGrady and Yao Ming.
Yeah, I started one of the first sports medicine programs here in Houston at St. John's Sports Medicine down in Clear Lake with a group of Harvard-trained orthopedic surgeons. You rarely saw injuries in intermediate school back then, but now you see injuries starting around 7th grade. And you got to get on top of that early. I think the training methods are so much better now than they used to be. I think we're more in tune with those injuries and holding them out a little bit longer than we might have. Back when in my days in high school, they gave you a salt tablet, no water, and told you to get back in the game. They don't do that anymore. And the cell therapy, ourselves and some of the stem cell programs out there, the promise of that is that we'll be able to do early intervention and we'll be able to prevent long-term cartilage damage. That cartilage is hard to regenerate once it's damaged. There's very little blood flow to that, and it just doesn't have enough nutrients to support for the regrowth of that cartilage. Cell therapy, fibroblasts, the promise of that is that we'll be able to go in early and be able to prevent long-term damage. So I think you'll see high school players get this. You'll see stem cells probably approved this year. You'll see us right after that.
And Mr. Wilcott, if you don't mind me asking, you as a former NFL player yourself, for younger players, like I just mentioned, NFL draft is coming up. For younger players to kind of get ahead on these injury problems that they sustain, how much do you think this program can actually help these players in their careers?
Well, we're talking about the ability to not only give people back their quality of life, but to even possibly, as this technology continues to grow and evolve, but to extend careers. You already have seen a player like a Tom Brady through his TB12 and the science of health and medicine really coming together. I've always said that athletes, we're like the guinea pigs for the rest of society, the rest of the population. You know why, Cody? Because we'll do anything to stay in the game. Like, right? Like if you told us, hey, we got this new innovative treatment, this new technology, we don't know if it works, but we want to try it. Every single athlete would say, I'm willing to give it a shot. And that's why Dr. Job, when he came out with this new special orthopedic technique, it was really a phenomenal pitcher who said, hey, you know what? I'll go ahead and I'll volunteer for it. And there's been so many athletes who have stepped forward to say, look, I'm willing to give it a shot. They end up playing so many more years. It extends careers. I think we're seeing that with Tom Brady. We've seen it with so many other athletes coming into professional sports, not just football.
If you look at the old videos of the former, back in the Oiler days when they were here, you look at those old locker room videos. They were drinking beer and smoking cigarettes in the locker room. I think they take a lot better care of their bodies now. And I think you're right. Not only lengthens your career, but it'll actually get you from an injury back on the field much quicker than you would have before.
Yeah.
Mr. Wilcott, former NFL player who played for the Bengals, the Vikings, and the Steelers. I know NFL draft probably brings a lot of memories back when you was actually preparing for the draft, and of course throughout your career. So, what are your thoughts about the 2022 NFL draft? Who are some of the prospects that you are kind of keeping your eyes on?
Well, first, before I go with that, I want everyone to know, if you want to find out more about this new Fibroblast technology, all you got to do is go to the company's website at www.FibroBiologics.com. That's FibroBiologics.com. As we turn our attention to the Houston Texans, I'm excited for the Texans going into the 2022 draft. They have 11 draft picks, right? They have 7 picks of the first 108 draft selections in the upcoming draft. They have 7 picks, including 2 in the first round. They're going to have 2 first-round picks for the next 3 years, not just in 2022, but in 2023, again in 2024. I think right now we're at the beginning of what could be an opportunity to build a tremendous foundation for this organization. And so I do believe that they have a quarterback that they're happy with right now in Davis Mills, the 3rd round pick last year from Stanford. So that means you want to be able to build around with offensive linemen. You want to be able to get edge rushers. You want to be able to get a cornerback. You want to be able to get wide receivers. This draft has plenty of players at those 4 positions that I just gave you. So when the Texans go on the clock with that 3rd overall selection, they could be looking to take an offensive tackle. Depends on what the Jaguars are going to do with the number 1 overall pick, and then the Lions at number 2. And so it could be Evan Neal from the University of Alabama. It could be Ike Iguanu from North Carolina State. It could be one of the talented wide receivers on the draft board. I believe Lovie Smith is inclined to take either an edge rusher or a cornerback because corners are so hard to find. And but for that defense and the style of play, which is more of a cover 2 zone defense, Lovie Smith has been known. That Tampa 2, remember with Tony Dungy and what he played when he was the head coach with the Chicago Bears. Most teams would want a man-to-man cover guy exclusively, and that would be Ahmad Sauce Gardner at the University of Cincinnati. But if you want a more universal corner, who can play in the cover 2 scheme, that can play cover 3 zone, that can play still man-to-man coverage as well, then for my money, that would be the talented corner out of LSU, Derek Stingley Jr. This is a guy that was the best corner in all of college football as a freshman in 2019 at LSU and helped Joe Burrow and those LSU Tigers to win a national championship. Now, he's been out with a foot injury over the last couple of years. He responded by running a 4.340 at his pro day. So I think he's dispelled some of the injury thoughts that many teams would have. So I think you're going to have your choice there. At any of those 4 positions, you're going to get a phenomenal player, but you have to be thinking foundational player that could help to build a franchise and help them one day become a champion.
Mr. Wilcott, last question before getting out of here. What do you remember about the NFL draft, preparing for the process and even, throughout your whole NFL career?
Yeah, I just remember going to the NFL Combine and going there as a college player who went there to compete and to try to improve your draft status. I didn't know that I would even have an opportunity to play in the NFL. Then I got a letter, an invitation to the scouting combine. And I said, oh, they screwed up now. They should have never let me in the door. and Pete can remember these days in 1987, everyone didn't walk around with a cell phone on their hip. We had to remember the numbers of our friends and our family. If you met a girl, you had to kind of remember. She had to know if you were smart. You had to ask for the number, still remember the number. Right? So I remember I had college roommates who didn't want to pay the phone bill. I mean, that's unheard of today. So I remember my neighbor, his apartment was next door to mine. He and I shared the phone. The phone was in his apartment, so I gave that phone number to the NFL scout who wanted to know where I was going to be on draft day and where they could reach me. I remember giving out that number. I had to ask the guy, are you even going to be home? Because if not, I'm going to need a key to your apartment. He says, well, I'm letting you use my phone. I'm not giving you a key to my apartment, but I will be home. I'll answer the phone. If someone calls for you, I'll let you know. Deep into the day, he calls and yells down the hall, Soloman, Cincinnati Bengals are on the phone. So that's how I knew I was drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals, as you can see from that helmet over my shoulder. It was Dick LeBeau who was on the other end of that call. And just like many of the players who are prospects in this year's draft, it is the call that can change your life. And that's what comes to mind, and that's what I'm hoping for many of the draft prospects in the 2022 draft. I hope that they get that call, and I hope they take advantage of the opportunity the NFL is going to afford them to really change the trajectory of their lives.
Mr. Wilcott, Mr. O'Haron, thank you so much for joining me on this quick hit edition of Locked On Texans. Really quick, where can our listeners and viewers follow you guys on social media?
Pete, go ahead.
We're on FibroBiologics.com, FIBRO Biologics.com.
And you can follow me at Solomon's Wisdom on Twitter. Just reach out and holler at me. Thank you for having us, Cody. We greatly appreciate it. We wish the Houston Texans a lot of luck. They haven't had a whole lot here as of late.
No, they have not. After they beat the Buffalo Bills in 2020 during that playoff series, it seems like everything just went downhill, starting with that playoff game.
Halftime at Arrowhead Stadium, that's when it went downhill. Halftime.
Painful.
Awesome,
Painful.
Well, thank you so much, guys. I really do appreciate it.
All right,
Okay.